I remember the air before anything happened. It was the kind of morning that did not rush itself. The sky had already softened from night, but the sun had not yet claimed its strength. The ground was cool beneath my feet, still holding the memory of darkness. I had risen early, not because I needed to, but because sleep had grown shallow these days. My thoughts woke before my body did. There were others nearby, though no one spoke much. We had gathered without urgency, as if drawn by something we could not name. Some sat on the ground, knees pulled close. Some stood, shifting their weight slowly. A few had children with them, still quiet way children are when they sense the world is larger than usual. I stood a little apart at first. I often did. Not because I felt unwelcome, but because I did not always know how to place myself among people when my heart was full of things without clear edges. It felt easier to listen than to speak, easier to watch than to explain myself. The land around us was open and gentle. Low grass, worn paths, stones smoothed by many feet. This was a place used to listening. The wind moved through it without resistance. Even the birds seemed unhurried, calling out and then falling silent again, as if they knew there was no need to fill every moment. I breathed slowly, letting the quiet settle. There was a comfort in not being asked anything yet. No one demanded words from me. No one needed answers. We were simply there, together, waiting without tension. I had come because something in me had grown tired of carrying itself alone. For a long time, I had learned how to appear steady. I did what was expected of me. I worked. I spoke when spoken to. I kept my doubts folded inward where they would not trouble anyone else. But steadiness, I was discovering, is not the same as peace. One can stand upright while still feeling hollow. That morning, I felt that hollowness more clearly than usual. Not as pain exactly, more like an open space that echoed when I moved. I did not know what I hoped to find here. I only knew that staying away felt heavier than coming. Someone near me shifted and exhaled slowly. The sound grounded me. It reminded me that I was not the only one holding something quietly inside. There is a particular comfort in that realization. It does not solve anything, but it softens the edges. When he arrived, there was no announcement. No one raised their voice. No one signaled for attention. He simply stepped into the space among us, as naturally as if he had always been there, and we were only just noticing. The people closest to him became still, and that stillness moved outward, like a calm spreading across water. I did not push forward. I did not need to see his face clearly yet. It was enough to feel the change in the air, the way listening deepened without effort, the way even my own breathing seemed to slow, as if it had found a better rhythm. He did not begin with words. That was the first thing that stayed with me. He stood there, present, unguarded. His attention was not scattered. It rested on us without weighing us down. I had known teachers before, men who spoke well and carried authority in their voices. They often felt distant, even when they were kind. This was different. His presence did not rise above us. It settled among us. I felt no need to straighten myself. That surprised me. I had not realized how much of my life was spent adjusting, bracing, preparing to be evaluated. In his presence, those habits loosened, not because he demanded anything less, but because nothing was being demanded at all. I became aware of my hands resting at my sides. They were empty. I noticed that without shame. The quiet stretched, but it did not become uncomfortable. It felt intentional, like a pause that knew exactly how long it needed to be. In that space, my thoughts did not scatter. They gathered. Memories surfaced gently, without force. Moments I had not named before drifted into view. I thought about the ways I had learned to carry disappointment without showing it. About the prayers I had stopped forming into words because I no longer knew how to ask them honestly. About the quiet fear that perhaps this sense of distance I felt was simply the way life was meant to be endured. None of this felt exposed. It felt held. He looked at the people nearest him. then farther out. When his eyes reached me, they did not linger in a way that made me self-conscious. They simply rested there, as if acknowledging something already understood. I did not feel seen in the way that startles you. I felt recognized. There is a difference. To be seen can feel like standing in light. To be recognized feels like being remembered, even when you are unsure you deserve it. The second carries a warmth the first does not always have. Around me, others were shifting slightly now. Someone adjusted the way they were sitting. A child leaned into a parent's side. Small movements, unremarkable, yet full of trust. No one was leaving. No one was checking the distance to elsewhere. Time felt different then, not slower exactly, but fuller. Each moment seemed to have enough room for itself. I did not feel the usual urge to measure what might come next. I realized with a quiet certainty that I did not need to protect myself here, that thought did not arrive loudly. It settled, like a truth that had been waiting for permission to be acknowledged. I let my shoulders drop. I let the ground support me. I let myself remain where I was. Whatever this moment was becoming, it did not require me to hurry toward it. It was enough to stay. As the quiet held, something in me began to loosen its grip. It was subtle at first, a small easing like a knot giving way without announcement. I noticed it because my thoughts no longer felt crowded. They moved more slowly, making space for one another. I did not try to guide them. I let them come as they were. Hunger made itself known then, not sharply, not in complaint, just a steady presence, like a low note beneath everything else. I had eaten little that morning. Many of us had. No one had come prepared to stay this long, yet no one seemed troubled by it either. The body noticed, but the heart did not rush to solve it. I became aware of how often my life had been shaped by managing lack. I had learned early how to measure what was left, how to divide portions carefully, how to quiet desire before it grew loud enough to disappoint me. Hunger, in all its forms, had trained me to expect restraint, to accept that wanting more usually led to learning how to do without. Looking around, I could see that same carefulness in others. A man near me shifted his cloak, perhaps to hide how thin he had grown. A woman pressed her lips together when her child tugged at her sleeve, asking softly for food. Their faces did not carry panic, only familiarity. This was not a crisis. It was a known condition. We were a people accustomed to waiting. Waiting for relief, waiting for change, waiting for promises to take on weight. As these thoughts surfaced, I felt no bitterness in them, only recognition, a naming of what had always been there. There is something steadying about naming the truth quietly, without accusation. He had begun to speak then. His voice did not rise, it did not command the air. It moved through it, gentle and sure, like water finding its way along a familiar path. I cannot remember every word. I remember how it felt to listen. He spoke of the kingdom of God, but not as something distant or unreachable. He spoke as if it were already brushing against our lives, already near enough to be noticed if we learned how to pay attention. His words did not press urgency into us. They opened space. As I listened, I became aware of a deeper hunger than the one in my body. It was the hunger to be understood without needing to explain myself. The hunger to believe that my quiet faithfulness, my small endurance, my unnoticed days mattered in ways I could not always see. The hunger to rest without feeling irresponsible for doing so. I had carried these needs without language for them. Hearing him speak did not fill them yet. It simply revealed them, the way light reveals a room you have been living in by memory alone. I noticed my hands again, still empty. That, too, carried recognition. I had come with nothing to offer, no wisdom worth sharing, no resources to distribute, no solutions hidden away. I was not useful in the ways I had learned to measure usefulness. Strangely, this realization did not shame me. It clarified something. I did not need to prove my worth here. My emptiness was not a failure. It was simply true. And truth, when allowed to be quiet, does not wound. It steadies. Around me, people leaned in slightly, not out of urgency, but out of attention. No one interrupted. No one competed for notice. Even disagreement, which so often lives just beneath the surface of gatherings, felt absent. We were not trying to take from one another. We were listening together. As the hours passed, the sun rose higher. Warmth settled on our shoulders. The land held the heat gently, without glare. Time continued to move, but it did not press. I realized then that staying had cost us something. Not dramatically, not heroically. It had cost us comfort. It had cost us certainty. It had cost us the option to leave early and return to what was predictable. We had chosen to remain, even as the day stretched on without clear resolution. That choice revealed something about us. We were not here because it was convenient. We were here because something essential was being addressed, even if we could not yet name what it was. The disciples moved among us occasionally. I noticed them speaking in low voices, their expressions thoughtful, restrained. They, too, were aware of the growing hunger, of the late hour, of the limits of what could be done. I recognized myself in them. The impulse to assess, to calculate, to quietly prepare for disappointment so it would not surprise us later. This, too, was familiar. I had lived much of my life bracing for scarcity, not because I lacked faith, but because experience had trained me to expect it. Hope, I had learned, should be kept modest, manageable, safe. Yet here I was, staying longer than was reasonable. As I acknowledged this, I felt no anxiety about it, only curiosity. Something in me was willing to risk being unprepared, just this once, willing to see what might happen if I did not retreat at the first sign of need. I noticed the faces around me more closely now, not as a crowd, but as individuals, lines of weariness softened by attention, eyes that carried grief without dramatizing it, shoulders that had borne responsibility quietly for many years. These were not people waiting to be impressed. They were people waiting to be met. In that recognition, I felt less alone, not because my needs were suddenly unique or special, but because they were shared. Hunger, uncertainty, longing, restraint. These were not private failures, they were human conditions. And here in this place they were not hidden. He paused in his speaking then. Let the silence return. No one rushed to fill it. In that pause, the recognition settled fully within me. I had not come here to be fixed. I had come here to be honest. Honest about what I lacked. Honest about what I carried. Honest about how tired I was of carrying it alone. The day was far from over, but something essential had already been named. And naming it changed the way I stood there, empty-handed among the others, waiting without fear. The pause lasted longer than I expected. Not long enough to make anyone restless, but long enough to let the weight of the day settle fully into our bodies. The sun stood high now, its warmth steady and honest. Shadows shortened beneath us. No breeze came to rescue us from the heat. We remained. I felt the hunger in my body more clearly now. It was no longer a quiet note beneath everything else. It had risen to the surface, asking to be acknowledged. My stomach tightened gently, not in pain, but in reminder. I shifted my weight and let the sensation be what it was. There was no embarrassment in it. That surprised me. So much of my life had been spent pretending not to need things. Food, rest, understanding, forgiveness. I had learned to carry need as something to be hidden, managed privately so it would not trouble others. Here, that instinct felt unnecessary. The need was shared, visible, almost communal. I noticed small movements around me. Someone tearing a piece of dried bread and handing it to a child, apologetically, knowing it would not be enough. Someone else shaking their head gently as if to say, "It's all right. I can wait." Waiting had become the posture of the day. Not passive waiting, not resignation. A waiting that stayed present, that kept listening, that did not close itself off even as discomfort grew. I felt that posture forming in me too, a willingness to remain open even when I did not know how things would resolve. He looked at us again. This time I sensed a shift, not urgency, not concern in the way we usually recognize it. Something deeper, a seeing that took in the whole of us, our bodies, our weariness, our hunger, our choice to stay. I had seen leaders notice crowds before, usually as a problem to be managed, numbers to be organized, needs to be controlled. This was not that. His attention did not skim the surface of our condition. It rested within it. The meaning of that settled slowly. We were not an interruption. We were not an inconvenience. We were not a situation that needed to be concluded quickly. We were people who had stayed. That realization carried weight, not the kind that presses down, but the kind that anchors. It made my presence feel justified, as if simply being there, hungry and attentive, mattered in ways I did not need to argue for. The disciples gathered near him. Their voices were low, but I could sense the tension in their movements. Practical concern, shaped by compassion but limited by experience. I recognized that tension intimately, the place where care meets constraint, where responsibility collides with reality. I felt no judgment toward them. They were naming what was obvious. There was not enough food, not enough time, not enough means. These were facts. Facts I had lived with my entire life. Yet as they spoke, I noticed something else rising within me. Not expectation, not certainty, a quiet attentiveness. It was as if the meaning of the moment was forming beneath the surface, still hidden but undeniable in its presence, like the ground shifting before a seed breaks through. You cannot see it yet, but you can feel that something is underway. He listened to them fully. He did not dismiss their concerns. He did not rush past their realism. He received it, held it, honored it. That alone felt important. The limits were not denied. Scarcity was not spiritualized away. Then he spoke to them, and though I could not hear every word clearly, I felt the effect ripple outward. It was not dramatic, it was decisive. The kind of decisiveness that does not need volume to assert itself. The kind that comes from alignment rather than force. I saw the disciples still themselves, their agitation settling into readiness. Readiness for what I did not yet know. I noticed then how still the crowd had become. Hunger had not driven us into restlessness. It had drawn us into attention. No one pushed forward. No one demanded explanation. We were waiting, but not with impatience. It occurred to me that this too carried meaning. We had not gathered because we expected provision. We had gathered because we had found presence. That mattered more than I realized. In my own life, I had often confused the two. I sought outcomes when what I needed was encounter. I chased resolution when what would have sustained me was understanding. Here, the order was reversed. Presence had come first. Meaning was unfolding within it. I became aware of my breathing again, slow, deep, unforced. My body, despite its hunger, felt grounded. I was not anxious about what would happen next. I was curious. That, too, felt new. Curiosity had been a risky posture in my life. It opened the door to disappointment. Hope, once awakened, could ache when unmet. I had learned to keep it muted. Here, curiosity felt safe. It did not demand a particular ending. It simply stayed awake. The disciples began to organize us, gently, without command. Small groups forming naturally, people moving without resistance. There was no confusion, no argument. We complied not because we were told to, but because it felt right to do so. As I sat with those near me, I felt the shared vulnerability of the moment. Empty hands, empty baskets, empty stomachs. No one pretended otherwise. The lack was exposed, but it did not humiliate us. It united us. I looked down at the ground between my feet. Dust, small stones, bits of dry grass, ordinary things. I had walked on ground like this my entire life. Suddenly, it felt significant. as if meaning were not reserved for holy places alone, but was willing to settle wherever people were honest about their need. He took the bread. I did not see where it came from at first. It was small, almost unimpressive, the kind of offering I would have dismissed immediately, knowing how many mouths waited nearby. I felt the old calculation rise in me instinctively. This will not be enough. The thought was not cynical. It was practiced. Experience speaking before wonder had a chance to respond. Yet when he held it, that calculation loosened. Not because the bread changed, but because the moment did. He did not rush. He did not hide its smallness. He held it openly as it was, without apology. And in doing so, he granted it a dignity I had rarely afforded to small things, to small beginnings, to small offerings, to small faith. He gave thanks. The words were simple, familiar, the kind spoken every day in ordinary homes, nothing ceremonial, nothing elevated. Gratitude spoken into scarcity without denial or fear. That was when the meaning settled fully in me, not as a conclusion, not as a lesson, as a recognition. This moment was not about what we lacked. It was about what we were willing to place openly into trustworthy hands. I felt my emptiness differently then, not as a problem to be solved, but as space. Space where something could be received, space that did not need to be filled immediately to be worthwhile. I sat there, hungry, attentive, unafraid. And whatever was about to happen, I understood this much already. I had not stayed in vain. When the bread was broken, there was no sound that announced it. No sharp crack, no gasp from the crowd, just the quiet motion of hands doing something they had done many times before. I watched closely, not because I expected anything unusual, but because everything now felt worth noticing. He broke the bread slowly, not out of ceremony, but out of care. Each movement deliberate, unhurried, as though time itself had agreed to follow his pace. I realized then how rarely I allowed myself to move without rushing toward an outcome. Even kindness in my life often carried speed. Here, nothing was hurried, not even necessity. The pieces were passed to the disciples. I remember thinking how ordinary they looked carrying them. No glow, no signal that anything had changed, just men holding bread, stepping carefully among seated people. If I had not been watching, I might have missed the significance entirely. The first piece reached the group nearest me. I watched a woman accept it with both hands, as if it were something fragile. She did not look surprised. She did not smile in disbelief. She simply nodded, quietly, and passed a portion to the person beside her. The bread kept moving. That was the first thing I understood. It did not pause to prove itself. It did not wait for recognition. It moved forward, hand to hand, without interruption. When a piece finally reached me, I took it instinctively before my thoughts could interfere. It was warm from other hands, rough at the edges, real. I broke off a small portion and held it for a moment longer than necessary. I do not know why. Perhaps I was waiting for doubt to catch up to me. Perhaps I was listening for fear. Neither came. What I felt instead was a steady clarity. This was enough for now. I ate slowly. The taste was simple, familiar, not remarkable in itself. Yet as I swallowed, I noticed something unexpected. The tightness I had carried in my chest for most of the day had eased, not disappeared but softened, as if nourishment had reached a place deeper than hunger. Around me, people were eating, not urgently, not greedily. No one clutched at what they had been given. No one hoarded. There was an unspoken trust moving among us, quiet and intact. The bread continued to be passed, and it did not run out. At some point, I stopped counting. That was the second thing I understood. I had lived much of my life counting what remained, measuring resources, measuring energy, measuring how much hope I could afford without risking too much disappointment. Counting had felt responsible, necessary, wise. But here, counting became unnecessary. Not because limits no longer existed, but because something greater than calculation was at work. Something that did not deny reality, yet was not governed by fear of it. I ate until my hunger eased. Not until I was full in excess. Just enough. Enough to quiet the body so the heart could listen again. Enough to remind me that being cared for does not require being overwhelmed. As the bread continued to circulate, I noticed how faces changed. Not dramatically, not suddenly. Just small shifts. Shoulders lowering, eyes softening, conversations beginning in murmurs. People glancing at one another with something like recognition, as if we were realizing, together, that we were safe to receive without shame. That understanding settled in me gently. I did not need to earn this. I did not need to explain myself. I did not need to justify my hunger. It was enough that I was there. I watched the disciples return again and again, hands still offering, expressions now calm. The tension I had sensed earlier was gone. In its place was focus, presence, a steadiness that mirrored his own. I realized then that provision had not begun with the bread. It had begun with attention, with seeing us fully, with refusing to send us away when our need became inconvenient, with honoring our hunger without turning it into a test. The bread was not a performance, it was a response. That distinction mattered. I thought about the many times I had believed I needed to have more faith before I could be cared for. More certainty, more obedience, more clarity. Here, understanding arrived without condition. Care met need as it was, not as it should have been. As I finished eating, I held the remaining piece in my hand for a moment. I did not know why I hesitated. Perhaps I was marking the moment, quietly, so it would not slip past me unnoticed. Then I passed it on. That, too, carried understanding. What I had received was not meant to stop with me, not because I was instructed to share, but because sharing felt natural once fear had loosened its grip. When the last person near me finished eating, we sat together in silence again. Not the silence from earlier, filled with waiting. This silence felt settled, rested, whole. I noticed the land once more, the same ground, the same sky. Nothing outward had changed, and yet everything felt different, as if meaning had woven itself into the ordinary and would not be removed again. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel enlightened. I felt aligned with my own need, aligned with the needs of others, aligned with the quiet truth that care does not always arrive loudly, but it does arrive faithfully. As the baskets were gathered, fuller than I would have believed possible, I did not lean forward to inspect them. I did not need proof. The understanding had already settled where it belonged. What mattered was not the abundance left over. What mattered was the absence of fear that had been with us before. I sat there, nourished and calm, knowing something had shifted in me that would not easily shift back. I would still know hunger. I would still know uncertainty. But I now understood this much, with a clarity that felt steady and kind. Lack does not have the final word, and presence is never wasted. I remained seated a while longer, letting that understanding settle into my body, my breath, my memory. There was no need to rush away. For once, staying felt complete. When the gathering began to loosen, it did so gently. No one stood all at once. No one rushed to collect themselves as if waking from something fragile. People lingered where they were, adjusting slowly, as though their bodies needed time to catch up with what their hearts had already absorbed. I stayed seated. The ground felt familiar beneath me now, no longer just a place to rest my weight, but a witness. I pressed my palm into the earth briefly, feeling its firmness, its patience. It occurred to me that the ground had held us all day without complaint. It had not asked who was worthy to sit upon it. Around me, quiet conversations began, nothing urgent, nothing loud, simple exchanges. A question asked softly, a shared glance, a laugh that did not try to dominate the space. People spoke as though they trusted the silence to return when it needed to. I watched families gather themselves. Children, now fed, leaned heavily against their parents. Some had crumbs on their hands, their faces relaxed in the way that only comes when need has been met without anxiety. The parents did not rush to clean them. They let the moment last. The disciples moved among us again, but now without task. Their hands were empty. Their faces carried something settled. They looked like men who had learned something without needing to say it aloud. I realized then that I felt no pressure to preserve the moment. That surprised me. So often, when something meaningful happens, I feel the urge to capture it, to hold on to it tightly before it fades. But this felt different. What had been given did not feel fragile. It felt rooted, as if it would remain even if I did nothing to protect it. I stood slowly. My body felt steady. Not energized in the way excitement brings, but grounded, as if my weight belonged to me again. Hunger no longer distracted me. Neither did the quiet ache of longing that had followed me for years. It was still there, perhaps, but it had softened. It no longer demanded my attention. I took a few steps away from where I had been sitting, then stopped. I looked back at the place. It looked ordinary again. Just land. Just people beginning to disperse. No sign remained of what had happened, except what we carried within ourselves. I understood then that this was how it was meant to be. Meaning did not need to announce itself afterward. It trusted itself to endure. He stood a short distance away, speaking quietly with a few of the disciples. I did not approach. Not because I felt distant, but because I felt complete. Whatever I had needed to receive, I had received. I did not feel overlooked. I did not feel dismissed. I felt finished in the best sense of the word. As I turned to leave, I noticed how naturally my steps fell into rhythm with those around me. No one directed us. We simply moved together for a while, then gradually parted, each heading toward our own lives again. I thought about what awaited me beyond this place. The same work, the same responsibilities, the same uncertainties. Nothing outward had been rearranged for my convenience. I would still need to plan meals. Still need to endure days that stretched longer than expected. Still need to face moments when what I had did not seem like enough. Yet something essential had shifted. I no longer felt alone inside those realities. The understanding I carried did not promise that I would never lack again. It promised something quieter and more durable. That lack itself was not a sign of abandonment. That hunger did not mean failure. That need did not disqualify me from being seen. As I walked, I noticed how my hands moved freely at my sides. They were empty again. And yet that emptiness no longer frightened me. I understood now that empty hands are not an ending. They are a posture, one that allows receiving, one that allows passing on, one that does not confuse possession with security. I thought of the bread breaking, not the sound of it, but the way it had been held. With care, with gratitude, without apology for its smallness. I realized I could carry my own life in the same way. What I had, as it was, did not need to be dismissed or hidden. It could be offered honestly, without calculation. That understanding settled into me as something I could return to, not a memory to relive, not a miracle to demand again, a way of seeing. As the path carried me farther from the gathering, the sounds of others faded. Footsteps separated, voices thinned. Eventually I walked alone. And yet, I did not feel solitary. The quiet that surrounded me now felt companionable. The kind of quiet that does not ask to be filled. The kind that allows you to breathe without explanation. I paused once more, just long enough to notice the sky. The sun was beginning its slow descent, unhurried. Light stretched across the land, touching everything equally. No effort was made to favor one place over another. I took that in without trying to interpret it. Then I continued on. I carried no basket, no leftover bread, no proof to show anyone who had not been there. What I carried was simpler, a steadiness, a trust that presence matters, and knowing that being met does not require being impressive. The day would end. Others would forget details. Life would resume its familiar patterns, but this would remain. Not as a story I needed to tell, but as a quiet assurance I could live from. And as I walked on, I felt no urge to hurry. I was already where I needed to be.